All right, so the DISA, as we've already mentioned a couple times already, we have the global infrastructure, and I think mostly transport, and as Mr. Bennett just said, gateways, to include the SATCOM gateway component of that. So that's what we do on a global scale. So you saw that picture that Mr. Bennett referenced from Mr. Montemurro this morning as well. That's our portfolio, kind of in a nutshell. Now there are some bits and pieces that aren't necessarily on the chart for clarity's perspective, but because you just can't fit it all on there. But we own that global infrastructure. We're managing and evolving that, and of course, Scott Rodakowski's group is doing the day-to-day management of it. So here's what our strategic focus is. Now I'm not going to read you what's on the chart. This chart's been around for a while, but what it boils down to is we need to have a robust network that's essentially always on and can connect to any user anywhere on any device. So we talked about mobility and how that ties into this infrastructure. We talked about, all the other unique endpoints that are out there that they're riding across this global network infrastructure in order to get to either the data they need at the data center or the enterprise applications that we mentioned, or whatever else you need to do to communicate between the warfighter and the other mission partners. So we're operationally focused, as I just mentioned, not only from a perspective of down to the foxhole and the warfighter, but also, as you see on there, the command and control and the national senior leadership components of that. So we have a capability called our Enterprise Executive Travel Kit, or DECTEC. We provide the gateway services for those travel kits to get back into the DISA as part of the DODA. Then the joint and the joint commanders and allied commanders, they're using our infrastructure to conduct operations. And then as you see the little drone, I always like to highlight that one because we're not only providing the comms capabilities for the pilots to remotely fly those capabilities, but we're also doing the video distribution of the video and the sensor data that's coming back from them. So a really big deal. I mean, this is something we highlight at the morning operations brief on a daily basis. That's how critical this capability is. And then on the other side of the chart, that's just named operations where our capabilities were a critical component or a critical capability used during those particular operations. So in my platform chart, if you will, I really break it down into two separate portfolios, right? We have a SATCOM portfolio, which is really a SATCOM and gateway portfolio, and then our network portfolio, which we have other purpose gateways in, and we'll get to that in a minute. So on the SATCOM side, obviously we have one of the ACAT-1 programs, Teleport. We also have MilSatCom gateways, and what was mentioned before, we had the commercial SATCOM contracting capability that's moving to AFSpace to include Iridium. And those, I showed those on the bottom to indicate that that's the part of that portfolio that's moving. And then over on the network side, terrestrial, as I mentioned, the gateways, the senior national leadership communications, which I mentioned, not only the enterprise travel kits, but also think of like the Moscow hotlink, right? My directorate actually provides that capability. For a term we use, our frenemies, right? So we have that kind of capability with Russia, we have that kind of capability with China, and then we also provide similar type of capabilities for SecDef to his counterparts in about 45 other countries. And then I have something on there called special services. So a lot of people may not realize that we actually manage one of the internet root servers out of IE. So we have the G root. So we are providing DNS resolution for the internet. We also happen to manage the .mil, .smil, and .sgov DNS root servers as well, top-level domain servers. I won't read them, but at the bottom, that's kind of like a snapshot of all the different stats currently going across the infrastructure. All right, so grand design, where are we going, right? So I mentioned a little bit of this already about where we want to go from a survivable, robust infrastructure. And essentially, we need to do that because of the way the architecture and the way all of IT is evolving, right? So before JRSS, all of that security stack or all that security capability was being done at a very distributed way. But now it's not. Now we went to a regional approach, and so there's a much greater reliance on the network being there, almost like a utility, that it needs to be on, and it needs to always be there, and you have to count on it being there, and you're really not happy when it's not there, and that's the calls I typically get. But again, as I mentioned, it's United in Service, it's connecting the users, like I said, any device, anywhere, and evolving the network to make it that survivable. And we've done a lot of work in this area, but we're obviously not done, right? So what was mentioned this morning by Mr. Deasy, artificial intelligence, we think that could be a very critical component of how we can make this network more survivable, to where the network can essentially self-heal itself. It can determine that there's problems that are going to happen, and we can proactively fix them before they actually fail. So those are the type of things that we're looking for industry's help on. How do we do that? And I've had some of those discussions today, and I'm certainly willing to hear any ideas or anything that you guys have out there that you've leveraged that we could implement into our infrastructure. And then, of course, emerging our DISA services. So we've had the goal of everything over IP for quite a while, and we've made a lot of good progress getting there. We also, I'll touch on it a little bit in a couple more slides about our, removing our legacy infrastructure as well. And of course, we got NFV, that was mentioned this morning as well, and software-defined network. All right, so this is kind of a graphical representation of what I was talking about any device, anywhere. We would be leveraging any kind of capability, whether it's our own inherent capability or commercial services that we have available. One thing I'll highlight on here is we now have a capability in Korea for our mid-Earth orbit. Now, it's not fully capable yet because we're still working out the spectrum component of it in the HNA, but having that mid-Earth orbit type of capability as a backup to the DISA infrastructure, we're starting to look at things like that and how we can do that in more places as well. And I think we had the 5G, there was a 5G question that's actually here on my chart. So obviously, as it becomes a more mature capability and something that we can leverage for the DISA, we are obviously looking at doing that. All right, so I got about 5 priorities here. I'm only going to cover one thing on each chart. I'm going to try to go through these quickly. You might have already seen these once before. So as I mentioned earlier, so we have on here, and I highlighted this one. I kind of can't see it too well, but it's the bolded one called Universal Gateways. So we're already working with Jake and his team on the mobility side. I don't see him in here anymore. We're working with him to come up with how do we combine the mobility gateway capability with our executive travel kit capability to have more of a universal type of gateway. So where we want to get to is we've built all these special use gateways. Now, how do we get them to be more common, where I can, from a gateway, do more than one service? These are all part of the DISA enhancements. There's several other ones on there that are also in flight. You can certainly take a look at them as they're posted. On legacy elimination, TDM elimination, this one's near and dear to my heart right now. We have a very old and aging TDM infrastructure that we're trying to remove. If you've heard of Promina, it's so old that the company that built it is no longer in existence. So we're essentially, really trying to accelerate how can we get that legacy infrastructure out of our network. So that's a big one and a huge priority for me. Oops. There we go. Survivable infrastructure, I mentioned this as well. We've done a lot of good work on this. The one I wanted to highlight here is, we're standardizing our architecture in both PAC and SWA and what we call a 3-core architecture, where essentially we're putting in 3 core nodes. In PAC, it'll be at the major land masses, and in SWA, it'll be 3 at the major node sites. Again, the intent is to make it more survivable and make it easier for us to continue providing those capabilities. Satellite improvements, UVDS, I wanted to highlight that. So we're actually actively putting in additional UVS capabilities to support the PACOM theater. So that's going on right now. You'll see that also in the opportunities that I highlight. So if you're not familiar with this, this is the video distribution system, what I mentioned with the Predator drones and other sensors that are out there. So we collect those video feeds and then we make them available for decision makers to use those video inputs. And technology refresh. So we do have an investment line for doing tech refresh and tech insertion of the DISN. I highlighted on this chart our SIPRNet refresh, specifically looking at Ethernet security specification. This is obviously something that NSA is doing the development work, and we are funding through our RDT&E profile some additional specifications that we need for the network and the future encryption devices that will be built. All right, so that's my charts. So now we'll go into our opportunities for 19 and beyond. And like many of the ones before me, I pretty much did this by division. So there's no grand, it's not like these are the top priorities. That's not the way it was put out there. So the first one was a enhanced mobile satellite service. The big EMS airtime contract is currently under negotiation, so we can't talk about that, obviously, but there are a bunch of support contracts that go with that. So this is one of those support contracts that we anticipate would come out in this fiscal year. The one below that, I know has a cryptic name. This is, again, one of those customers who came in specifically looking for commercial SATCOM services. And again, since these go out on our contracts, this is an opportunity that will be coming out. It's actually a follow-on to an existing contract, which expires in FY19. We have a BPA also coming out for AFRICOM. This is for some reach-back capability in Europe. That's also anticipated to come out this year as well. And then the wideband enterprise satellite service. This is another customer commercial SATCOM capability that will be coming out this year as well. And if you notice, I put in the program office, I included AFSpace since they will be moving to AFSpace this fiscal year. Last one for commercial SATCOM is the Joint SATCOM Engineering Center. This is providing the KU band space segment support for commercial SATCOM. And then moving on from the commercial SATCOM down to our CETA contract, which is an engineering contract for our mill SATCOM gateway support. So they provide a lot of different capabilities for that as well. So again, this is another follow-on contract where the current contract is expiring and we're doing a recompete. This one, as I can see, is a small business set aside. Next one, we have the DISN IP SATCOM communications. This is an integration and engineering support opportunity. Also another follow-on. We're projecting that would be second quarter of 19. We're still working out the acquisition strategy on that. And then, as I mentioned, the UVDS opportunity earlier, here's that one, also second quarter of 19. And this is to maintain the existing UVDS baseline. And this is my last one on the slide. This is a GCDS2, which is our global content delivery service. This is a cache forward capability. It's not only used for mission partners who have requirements to forward deploy content closer to their customers, but we also are now using it for internet caching as well. And actually, we have a capability that they are bringing, the current vendor is bringing to us to basically do break and cache so that we can cache a lot more of that and take a lot of pressure off of our internet access points for all the bandwidth that's going through them. And that is my last chart, so we can go to questions.
Here's a question. How does a non-traditional defense contractor meet your requirements for being on the APL list to supply product to DISA?
Okay, so a non-traditional. So I think pretty much everything on the APL is a non-traditional defense contractor. So we run the approved products list for DoD-CIO. It wasn't necessarily mentioned earlier this morning, but we have a very large document that used to be called the Unified Capabilities Requirement. Now it's called, I think, the DoDIN Capabilities Requirement, that lays out in different categories, for different categories of equipment, what are the minimum set of requirements to get on the APL. Now, I will caution you, if you go to that, you may not find a category for your particular equipment, and we have run into that And there are certainly ways that we can work around that particular shortfall. But, essentially routers, switches, a lot of the comm gear that we use, the voice and the video, because it all came up out of the unified capabilities, all that was smashed together into one big document. That's what we use to do our APL certification testing. Actually, JITIC is the sole certifier of the APL. So, if there's a specific question, I'm not sure who submitted the question, but if you have a specific question, come talk to me and I can help you out. It's actually not that difficult, and I can certainly, if I can't specifically answer your question, I know who I can send you to get the right answer.
Will all the DISA COM-SATCOM personnel transfer to Air Force Space? And will they be geographically relocated? I'm sorry, will they geographically relocate some of their functions?
Too soon to tell on both. So as Mr. Bennett mentioned, we are still working MOU or MOA with them. We believe there will be a transfer of function, but again, that's not worked out yet. That seems to be the indication that we've been getting from Air Force, and that's certainly our intent. At least as what we're tracking right now, there will not be a move, if you will. They intend to stay in the NCR. But all subject to change. That's just kind of where we're negotiating at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Osborn.